And ladies and gentlemen, welcome into our preseason top 25 college football release podcast and episode. Glad to be with you once again. And let's just jump right into it. Coming in at number 25 will be the Kentucky Wildcats. A lot of excitement this year in Lexington. New incoming transfer quarterback, junior Brock Vandegrift, and they returned maybe the best defensive tackle in all of college football in Deion Walker. We like the way this team schedule sets up, especially in the first 2 weeks before they have to face the Georgia Bulldogs. But right now, we're going to slot them in at the 24 spot. Coming in at number 24, formerly of the Pac-12, now fighting out of the Big 12, will be the Arizona Wildcats. We know that this team has a new head coach. Enter in Brent Brennan coming over from San Jose State, and he's going to bring back offensive coordinator, I should say, Dino Babers, who was with the program years ago. Took the head coaching job there at Syracuse, and now is back as the offensive coordinator. This team was really successful when Dino was the offensive coordinator there, so he'll see if he can recoup that magic. Now, they didn't lose in the transfer portal. That dynamic duo at the quarterback spot, Noah throwing to T-Mac, his longtime wide receiver. Those guys have history dating back to before even starting college. So we'll see if the Arizona Wildcats in their first year in the Big 12 can really have a really good season to start off the year. Soft first 2 weeks of the season, non-conference wise, you're talking about New Mexico and Northern Arizona before business really starts to pick up with a road game to Kansas State and heading over to Utah to play the Utes. Coming in at number 24 out of the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Virginia Tech Hokies. This is a team that I have been extremely high on since early on in the preseason, returning a dynamic quarterback and just a ton of starters back on this roster this year. Looks like 17 returning starters. So Calvin Downs at the quarterback spot, maybe the most dynamic quarterback in the Atlantic Coast Conference this year. We'll see if Cam Ward out of Miami has anything to say about that. This defense is absolutely loaded. And folks, this schedule absolutely sets up well for this team to kind of get their sea legs under them in the first 3 weeks with a road trip to Vanderbilt, home date against Marshall, and then traveling across the state to play Old Dominion. So this thing could set up really well in the non-conference for the Hokies out of Virginia Tech. Coming in at number 22 is the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, we all heard the jokes, and we absolutely made a few of them ourselves about how bad this offense was. Even with a poor offensive performance last year, Phil Parker, maybe the best defensive coordinator in all of college football, has that Hawkeye defense absolutely humming. He brings back a lot of starters on that defensive unit. Looks like about 8 starters back. I like the way that this team sets up, and if they're able to get anything out of that offense, Cade McNamara, former transfer from Michigan, got hurt last year, so we didn't really get the chance to see him perform. Out is Brian Ferentz at the offensive coordinator spot. In comes Tim Lester. If this offense can give that defense any kind of support, expect Iowa to be once again in the hunt to have a fantastic season there. Coming in at number 21, now conference rival, the USC Trojans. We know that this is a very important year for head coach Lincoln Riley. Needs to kind of take a step forward there. Alex Grinch is no longer the defensive coordinator. In from UCLA to run this defense is DeAnton Lynn. We saw the progression that he made with that Bruin defense. If he's able to make just a moderate jump for USC, this team could absolutely be spectacular. We know that they lost quarterback Caleb Williams to the NFL draft, but they returned a talented set of wide receivers led by Zachariah Branch. And from what we're hearing out of Los Angeles, this young man is absolutely ready to roll this year. So hit the freshman wall a little bit last year. Expect him to be a big time performer this coming season. Coming in at number 20 out of the Atlantic Coast Conference will be the Miami Hurricanes. We know the expectations for this team to kind of get back to being the U. We'll see if they can, first of all, under head coach Mario Cristobal, find their way into a bowl game. This is once again, another big year for a head coach who has struggled back at his alma mater, going 12-13 in his first 2 years back in Coral Gables. This needs to be a major step up this year. We talked about Cam Ward coming in from Washington State as the quarterback. Xavier Restrepo will be his probably number one target there at the wide receiver spot. The defense is where we really got to see this team absolutely continue to step up and play really great defense. Saw a fantastic job last year from them. We need to see even more so this coming season for the Canes. Coming in at number 19 out of the Big 12, we're looking at Oklahoma State. Head coach Mike Gundy back once again at his alma mater and looking to once again get this team to make a deep run into the Big 12 conference championship run. A lot of talented teams there. No extremely elite team as far as true national championship contenders. So expect this to be a 4-horse race there in the Big 12 this coming season. If Ollie Gordon can remain on the field, remain focused, this rushing attack once again should absolutely be spectacular. Can they get something from the passing game out of Alex Bowman and once again see that defense who took a major step back last year make some improvements coming up this season? Former conference rival and in-state team, we head now to the Southeastern Conference and welcome in Boomer Sooner. And head coach Brett Venables looks to get this team off to a good start there in their first season in a new conference in the Southeastern Conference. A lot of turnover with this roster. New offensive coordinator Seth Luttrell coming back to the program to run the offense, as Jeff Levy is no longer there, as he's the new head coach there at Mississippi State. Offensive line in flux. First-time starter in Jackson Arnold. But the calling card for the Sooners this year has to be the defense. We've talked about defensive tackle David Stone quite a bit, and if he can live up to the billing, that is one of your building blocks there. Danny Strassman at the linebacker spot, absolutely fantastic. And at the third level, Billy Bowman, who absolutely will be making plays all over the field for the Sooners. We know that this schedule is absolutely loaded after they get past a couple of tune-up games in the first 3 weeks. Looking at home games against Temple, Houston, and Tulane before they welcome in for the first time the University of Tennessee, kicking off SEC play for the Sooners. A lot of challenges, a lot of ups and downs. It's no longer just Texas and walk your way to the Big 12 title game. The Sooners will be in for a dogfight this year. Coming up next at number 17 will be the Kansas State Wildcats. The Little Apple will be once again rocking and rolling this year as the Kansas State Wildcats under their head coach, who has done a fantastic job during his entire tenure there, and Chris Kleiman, solid record in his first 5 years. New offensive coordinator as Klein takes a job elsewhere, and now we're going to see two offensive coordinators there in Kansas State. Connor Rodley and Matt Wells, can they replicate what we saw from Colin Klein last year and really get this offense absolutely kicked into high gear? They're going to turn the reins over to Avery Johnson, who was going to beat out now current Ohio State quarterback Will Howard for the starting spot there. They have a lot of faith and a lot of confidence in this young man at the quarterback spot, and he's going to look to get a lot of two-way go with running back DJ Giddens, who may be a co-favorite for Big 12 Player of the Year honors. That's how much we think of his ability at the running back spot. His team will get a couple of tune-up games early on in the season with UT Martin and then traveling to Tulane before they welcome in Arizona to kick off conference play. Coming in at number 16 out of the Southeastern Conference is the Texas A&M Aggies. Aggies look to kind of rectify some of the issues that we saw previously under head coach Jimbo Fisher. Welcome back former Aggie defensive coordinator under Jimbo Fisher, Mike Elko, now takes over the head coaching job there in College Station. He welcomes in offensive coordinator Colin Klein coming over from Kansas State. He has a fantastic quarterback under center there in Connor Wegman. If Wegman is able to stay healthy, he's got some talented wide receivers to throw to, and we're going to look right there at Moose Muhammad III. Yeah, son of Moose Muhammad, longtime NFL wide receiver. And even though that they lost some guys in the transfer portal off of this defense, they also brought in some talent. The best pass rusher out of the Big Ten last year, coming back home to College Station, and Nick Scorden. He is right now the best edge rusher in the Southeastern Conference. And yes, I said that correctly. We know who James Pierce is at Tennessee, but this kid absolutely can create havoc, and he's got a running mate on the interior in Shamar Turner. If that 1-2 combination can get going under Mike Elko, watch out for this team in College Station. They will kick it off with a primetime matchup versus Notre Dame. This is going to be a key matchup for both Notre Dame and for the Southeastern Conference. If Texas A&M is able to get that victory at home against Notre Dame, could set the SEC up for a very special season as far as how many teams could potentially make the college football playoffs. Coming in at number 15, the defending national champions, and that is the Michigan Wolverines. We know this team has lost a lot of talent. Head coach Jim Harbaugh has moved on to the NFL. Sherrod Moore, we got a chance to see him in a few interim games last year, so kind of got a feel for his play calling style, but now sitting in the number one chair, how will he look to shape this offense? Speaking of offense, 5 new starters on the offensive line there. New starting quarterback. We'll see coming out of fall camp who will be QB1 there for the Michigan Wolverines. What they do bring back is one of the best interior combinations at the defensive tackle spot. You're talking about Kenneth Grant, and Mason Graham anchoring the interior of that defensive line for new defensive coordinator coming from the NFL ranks in Don Wink Martindale. Expect this team to apply a lot of pressure, especially when you have arguably the best cornerback in all of college football in Will Johnson. I expect to see some regression with the Wolverines just because of all the talent and production that they lost off of that undefeated national championship team last year. But this team still has plenty of players to hit the field with this year, and expect Michigan to be in a bunch of dogfights this entire season. Coming in at number 14, we head down to Baton Rouge, and we will spend a couple of minutes with the LSU Tigers. You lose off of last year's team, the Heisman Trophy winner and second overall pick in the NFL draft in Jalen Daniels, a two-way threat if there was one last year. Over 1,000 yards rushing. We know the numbers that he put up out of the passing yards, well over 3,000 yards passing. 2 first-round picks are gone off of this team from last year in Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Make no mistake, folks, the LSU Tiger wide receiving core may not be known to everybody, but this is still LSU, and they still have plenty of talent there at the receiving core. Going to look to Lacey to step up and become wide receiver 1 for the Tigers. This defense, talking to a lot of people down there in Baton Rouge, this was one of the worst defenses that they've had at LSU in quite some time. One of the worst defense as far as total yards allowed, passing yards, rushing yards, and outside of the top 75 in scoring last year. They bring in former Missouri defensive coordinator Blake Baker to basically tighten up this ship on the defensive side of the ball. And we're going to put a lot of expectations on that fantastic junior in Harold Perkins. Want to see how new defensive coordinator Blake Baker kind of uses him this year. He's going to line up off the ball a lot more this year as a wheel backer. We'll see how much they use him as a fifth rusher, if you will, this coming season. And they get tested right out of the gate there in Las Vegas against the USC Trojans before they have a home game against Nichols, and then head to William Bryce Stadium to take on the South Carolina Gamecocks. So we're going to find out a lot about this secondary and really this defense as a whole very, very early in the season. We're going to stay right here in the Southeastern Conference, and we're going to head up to Rocky Top, Tennessee, and talk about the Tennessee Volunteers. Really good job last year from this team led by head coach Josh Heupel. His 3 years, 27-12. We like what we've seen so far. Want to see now if this team can take another step forward and get back into that upper echelon as far as the Southeastern Conference. Nico takes over at the quarterback spot. Maybe the most highly anticipated freshman quarterback there in Knoxville since a guy named Peyton Manning. So a lot of expectations on his shoulders. Now, different style of quarterback, but just the hype and the anticipation of seeing him step on the field is what we're referencing there. Got a chance to see him a little bit in the bowl game against Iowa. Won't put a lot of stock into that ball game, but he was able to get some live reps in a big time college football game there in the Citrus Bowl against Iowa. Solid numbers. Now, questions for Tennessee. We'll start with the offensive line. Is a lack of depth on the offensive line going to hurt the Vols as we get deeper into the season? That's something to keep an eye out on. The next question is, can someone please give James Pierce Jr. some help as far as the opposite defensive end, giving them some pass rush? If not, Pierce is going to see a lot more double teams. He's going to see a lot more chip blocking this year. Teams are really going to focus in on making sure that James Pierce Jr. does not get to the quarterback as much as he was able to get done last year. And finally, the question mark of the secondary. And I talked about this on a couple of spaces that I've done this offseason. Outside of the offensive line, no unit has to have more um, chemistry than the secondary. If you're going to be passing wide receivers off as far as um, corner to safety, you got to make sure that one corner's not playing zone and a safety's playing man. You got to make sure that that line of communication is working really well there. And this secondary was absolutely dismantled in the transfer portal. 11 players from the secondary transferred or went to the pros. So you don't have a returning veteran back there to kind of lead the defense. And this team is going to get tested not in week one against Chattanooga. So work out some of the kinks there. But the following week, they're in Charlotte, North Carolina against the NC State Wolfpack. That's a game where we're going to find out a little bit about this Volunteer defense in 2024. Up next, out of the Atlantic Coast Conference, is the Clemson Tigers. Say what you want to about Dabo Swinney and not hitting the transfer portal. Look, Dabo believes in what he believes in, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's been successful for him there in Clemson, and it will need to be once again this coming season. Cade Klubnik is back as the starting quarterback in his junior year. Got to see if he's going to make that jump now in year three. What we've seen from two of the better quarterbacks there at Clemson, talking about Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, in year three is where we really saw them take a major leap forward in their college career. Want to see if we can see that same progression out of Cade Klubnik. 19 touchdowns, 9 INTs last year. Want to see that production go up as far as the touchdowns go. Want to see him around 28 touchdowns this year. Cut those INTs down almost in half. Want to see him around 5 interceptions this year. The question that we've gotten as far as Clemson is not the offensive line, is can this wide receiving unit step up and really be what we've seen from Clemson wide receivers? You're talking about Sammy Watkins. You're talking about DeAndre Hopkins, all coming out of that Clemson program. We've seen a little bit of regression from the wide receiver spot, as not one wide receiver last year went over 700 yards in receiving last year. Really got to see that take a step forward. Will Shipley no longer there? Phil Maffa will take over as the RB1 there. And Phil did a great job sharing reps last year, found the end zone 13 times. We'll see now if he's going to be able to carry the weight of being the lead back and having a lot more on his shoulders to take care of. This team absolutely gets started with a absolute slobber knocker, as they will travel down to Atlanta and they will face the Georgia Bulldogs there in the Georgia Dome to kick off week one of the college football season. Up next, out of the Southeastern Conference, is the Missouri Tigers. And folks, if you thought that Missouri was going to take a step back after that fantastic campaign that they had last year, got some bad news for you. They are not taking a step back. And in fact, I think that this team is primed to have a fantastic year in 2024. Now, they lose running back Cody Schrader to the NFL. Over 1,600 yards rushing, over 14 touchdowns last season. But they do have returning quarterback Brady Cook and one of the best wide receivers in all of college football in Luther Burden III. He's got some talented running mates with him in Mookie Cooper and Theo Wise Jr. A very solid offensive line that only got beefed up a little bit more as former Oklahoma tackle Caden Green transfers to Missouri. Think about that for a moment. To man the left tackle spot. At the defensive end, Johnny Walker Jr. That's right. Johnny Walker Jr. looks to hit you with a strong cocktail of pass rushing ability there for the Missouri Tigers. We'll see if new defensive coordinator Corey Batoon is able to replicate some of the success that we saw last year from Blake Baker, who, as we mentioned earlier, is going to be there at LSU. This team will absolutely get a chance to get their feet under them the first 4 weeks. Home games against Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vanderbilt before traveling down to College Station to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. So if Missouri is able to get off to a 4-0 start, expect this team to go into College Station with a lot of confidence about where they are in 2024. As we get deeper into the top 10, and coming in at number 10 out of the Big Ten will be the Penn State Nittany Lions. A lot of expectations are, and I shouldn't just say expectations, a lot of expectation and a lot of pressure this year on head coach James Franklin. We know the record there in his 13 years there as a head coach, the last 10 of those being in Happy Valley. But getting over the hump against Michigan and Ohio State has been his bugaboo. The Big Ten doesn't have divisions anymore, so that pathway to the Big Ten championship game there in Indianapolis gets a little bit easier because you don't have to win your Eastern Division anymore. You just have to finish in the top 2. Bringing in from Kansas, former offensive coordinator Andy Kolecki, and if you remember, that Kansas offense has been must-see TV for the past couple of years. If he can bring some of that excitement there and really kind of hone into what Drew Aller can be, because if you look at just the raw numbers, 25 touchdowns, 2 INTs, now you love that from a decision-making standpoint, but what we got to see from Drew Aller is better play against better competition. We talked about that in the Big Ten podcast, where against some of the better teams in the Big Ten, and we're talking about Michigan, talking about Ohio State, he absolutely struggled in those 2 contests. So got to play better against big-time competition, and they're going to get this thing kicked off against West Virginia as they make the trip to Morgantown this year. Can Nicholas Singleton regain his form along with Katron Allen at the running back spot? That duo should be one of the better duos, not just in the Big Ten, but in all of college football. Want to see if this offensive line, after Olu Fashanu goes to the NFL, if they're able to really hold up and allow this ground game and Aller to be protected out of the passing game. On the defensive side of the ball, we expect Abdul Carter to absolutely create havoc. Him and along with his running mate, Kobe King, there in the front 7. This team created a lot of pressure last year on the defensive side of the ball, as they were ranked literally in the top 10 in all 4 major categories: scoring defense, rush defense. They were the best in college football last year. Passing, they were 7th, and in total defense, they were 2nd overall. If they're able to not just duplicate those numbers, but if they take a little slip back into the teens, upper teens, Penn State could absolutely be there in the dogfight for a Big Ten championship berth and possibly a college football playoff berth. Coming in at number 9 out of the Atlantic Coast Conference is the Florida State Seminoles. We know what happened to this team in the end of the regular season, losing their fantastic quarterback in Jordan Travis. This team brings in a familiar face to the Atlantic Coast Conference, as he was the former 5-star quarterback there for Florida State. After a 1-year stop there in Oregon State, and that's DJU. we've raved about the maturity, both on the field and off the field from DJ. Fantastic young man and fantastic leader. But here's what he's got to replace. He's got to replace the production at the quarterback spot from a decision-making standpoint. What we saw from Travis last year, 20 touchdowns, 2 INTs, over 2,700 yards through the air. And that's despite missing the last 2 games of the regular season last year. If DJ can give them solid quarterback play, expect this team to lean really heavy on the running game this year, as they got a stable of running backs that we are really impressed with. Former Alabama running back Roydell Williams looks to lead this running back by committee there in Tallahassee. Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson no longer on this roster, but from what we're hearing out of Tallahassee, they are more impressed by the upgrade in speed at the wide receiver spot this year. So if DJ can hone in his accuracy and hit those wide receivers in stride, you could see some big plays for this Florida State offense. Florida State has been built on defense for the last 30 plus years. And if they have any hopes of getting to the college football playoffs this year and getting back to an ACC championship game, it will be because of the defense. Marvin Jones Jr. could be the defensive player of the year in the Atlantic Coast Conference. We'll see if he can play up to his namesake, because we know how great of a player his dad was, finishing in the top 5, I believe, in the Heisman Trophy voting during his days there at Florida State. This team is absolutely loaded at all 3 levels, and they will look to get off to an early start there as they travel across the pond, head to Dublin, Ireland, to face on conference opponent in the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Coming in at number 8 is the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. And another head coach that absolutely needs to get off to a fast start this year is head coach Marcus Freeman. Now, the Irish bring in former Duke quarterback and Raleigh Leonard, and they have great expectations from this quarterback, kind of like they did last year with Sam Hartman coming over from Wake Forest. Did not get the kind of result that they were hoping for. So they dipped back into the transfer portal, and they're going to see if they can't get what they were hoping out of the quarterback spot last year. We talked about losing an anchor at the offensive line spot. Is Joe Alt now off to the NFL? This offensive line at Notre Dame doesn't come with the rave reviews that we've grown accustomed to over the past few years. So we'll see how quickly this offensive line can gel in 2024. The wide receiver spot has always been a question mark for Notre Dame as far as where is the elite speed there for the Fighting Irish. We'll find out if Jaden Thomas can step up and be that kind of wide receiver for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Another team that has a very talented defensive front. This unit is anchored by Howard Cross III. And folks, he is one of the best interior defensive linemen in all of college football. If he's able to get consistent pressure up the middle, that's going to allow this Notre Dame defense to really kind of remain as one of the nation's best defenses in all of college football. We talked about that week 1 showdown as the Irish will head down to College Station to face the Aggies of A&M. This will be a very pivotal matchup if Notre Dame has any aspirations of making the college football playoffs. Starting 1-0 versus 0-1 is going to be very, very significant. Coming in at number 7 out of the Big 12 Conference, the Utah Utes. This team took a step back last year because they didn't have their trigger man in Cam Rising. Missed the entire season recovering from that ACL tear that he suffered over a year ago in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State. Cam is back this year, along with a very familiar face at the tight end spot in Brent Keithy. This team has a very talented running back room, and the best head coach in that conference is Kyle Whittingham. In his almost 19 years at Utah, he has amassed a fantastic record, 162-79. This team is absolutely physical, both at the offensive line and defensive line spot. And when you look at the quality of quarterbacks that they're going to face in the Big 12 this year versus what they had to go up against last year in the Pac-12, there's no Michael Penix this year. There's no Caleb Williams this year. There's no Bo Nix on the schedule this year. The quarterbacks that they're going to face in the Big 12 this year is definitely going to be a step back. And this is for a unit that was still respectable there in the Pac-12 in all 4 categories. I expect that pass defense to be even better this year, as I mentioned, because of the lack of elite quarterbacks that they're going to go up against in the Big 12 as far as a passing standpoint goes. This team should get off to a fast start. Southern Utah, Baylor, and at Utah State are the first 3 games. Get that confidence and get Cam rolling, and we'll see just how well this team can be in 2024. Folks, we're down to the top 6 here, and we're going to spend a lot of time in the Southeastern Conference and the Big 10. And coming in at number 6, hotty toddy, folks, the Ole Miss Rebels come in as our number 6 team this season. Lane Kiffin said he needed more Jimmies and Joes, and they have absolutely brought in some really good Jimmies, and we'll see how they do in 2024. Fantastic offense led by senior quarterback Jackson Dart. He's going to be in the running for a lot of awards this year, and we'll see the further chemistry development with him and his number 1 target in Trey Harris. Now, Trey has some running mates with him, as well as we talked about Jordan Watkins and Juice Wells coming over from South Carolina. Can't forget about that big tight end either in Caden Priesthorn. I've said this quite a bit here during the offseason. I like that center anchoring that offensive line in Caleb Warren. I think sneakily could find himself in SEC honors as far as possibly being second team all SEC this year at the center spot. That's how good I think that this young man can be anchoring that offensive line for Ole Miss. Now, we understand gone from the running game is Quinshon Jenkins. He transfers to Ohio State. So it's going to be a lot of running back by committee. Ulysses Bentley IV will be the first one out of the gate there for Ole Miss. Let's flip over to the defensive side. Coming in from Texas A&M, Walter Nolan. In his junior season, if Nolan can stay healthy and perform to the level that we think that he can perform at, expect Walter Nolan at the end of the season to be in line for a lot of awards and could find himself as a top 15 pick in this upcoming NFL draft. Jaden Ivey at one edge rushing spot, along with from Florida, Princely Nellen will anchor that front four along with J.J. Pegues. Biggest question mark that I have for the Ole Miss Rebels is in that defensive secondary. Can those cornerbacks hold up this year? And we really aren't going to find out just how good they are until probably we get to that Kentucky ball game. Because let's face it, Ole Miss has one of the softest schedules in all of college football this year. So it's not just about how many wins you get, Rebel fans. It's who you're going to get those wins against. And really, it boils down to 5 games for Ole Miss this year. Kentucky at LSU, home to Oklahoma, Georgia, and at Florida. You come out of that, let's call it 3-2 at the worst. Best case scenario, if you can come out of that 4-1 and take care of business in the rest of your games, now you talk about a team that could find themselves in the college football playoffs. If not, they're going to have a very difficult time there because that strength of schedule is not going to be something that is going to be looked on very favorably by the committee. Regardless of conference affiliation, you got to get some big-time wins there, Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin believes that you have the talent. I believe that you have a good enough roster to get it done. We'll kick it off here in just a few weeks. Coming in at number 5, gone is Nick Saban, but not so much gone Alabama. Kalen DeBoer last year led Washington to a national championship game against Michigan last year. So we've seen him on the big stage absolutely show what he can be as a head coach. Folks, Kalen DeBoer was the number 1 target by the Alabama program once Nick Saban decided to retire. How do I know? They basically had him hired in less than 72 hours after Nick Saban stepped down. And he brings in some familiar faces with him. From the Indiana staff years ago that he worked with, former South Alabama head coach in Kane Womack, left as a group of 5 head coach to become a Power 4 defensive coordinator. We've seen that a little bit here over the past few years in college football. And running the offense will be Nick Sheridan. Now, make no mistake, this will be Kalen DeBoer's offense. And for the first time, Alabama has a true offensive-minded head coach manning the sideline. So it's not going to be as big of a concern as the turnover at the offensive coordinator spot as it has been in many years. He has a very talented signal caller who only got better as the season went along last year in Jalen Milroe. And you talk about a dynamic runner and passer, over 20 touchdowns through the air, 12 touchdowns on the ground. If Jalen is able to continue his maturation at the quarterback spot, you're talking about putting a Alabama team on his shoulders and guiding them back to a college football playoff berth. And Jalen could find himself holding up a very significant trophy at the end of the year. The question about the wide receiver spot is warranted, but it's only from experience and not talent. This team has plenty of talent at the wide receiver spot, one of the deepest running back rooms in all of college football, led by Jam Miller. I expect that there not to be a drop-off whatsoever for Alabama. One of the best offensive lines in all of college football. Returning Caden Proctor, Tyler Booker, Parker Bransford anchoring at the center spot, and Jaden Roberts manning the right guard spot. This Alabama offensive line will be a lot better than what we've seen over the past couple of years under head coach Nick Saban. The defense, where does the pass rush come from? It is the one question we have. They have maybe the two best interior linebackers in all of college football, in Campbell and Lawson. A very, very good secondary led by Malachi Moore and Devontae Smith in that secondary. Coming over from Michigan, Keon Saab taking over from Caleb Downs, who transferred to Ohio State. This secondary, running this 4-2-5, will look a lot differently for Alabama fans this year, but expect them to make a lot of plays this coming season. Coming in at number 4, another Southeastern Conference team, the Texas Longhorns, coming fresh off of a college football playoff berth as well. Head coach Steve Sarkisian looks to get this team back into the college football playoffs this year. He returns quarterback Quinn Ewers. The biggest question for Ewers is, can he stay healthy all season long? Everybody knows who's waiting in the wings, kind of chopping at the bit to get into the lineup. And if Ewers, who's missed some time during his entire college career, needs to stay healthy there for the Longhorns. The wide receivers, and I should just say pass catchers, will see a lot of new faces this year. A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, and tight end Sanders all off to the NFL. They hit the transfer portal hard, and they went to Tuscaloosa and brought in a couple of players there as Amari Nyblack and Isaiah Bond come over from Tuscaloosa, and they head over to Austin to re-up this offensive skill position unit. Silas Bowden will also be there at the wide receiver spot, along with Jonte Cook, to round out that trio of wide receivers for the Texas Longhorns. This offensive line for Texas will be one of the best in college football, anchored by Kevin Banks Jr. He, along with Will Campbell for LSU, potentially 2 top 10 picks at next year's NFL draft. They are some of the best offensive tackles you're ever going to lay eyes on. And with that kind of stable at the offensive tackle spot, expect Texas to light up the scoreboard once again this year. Week 2, big-time matchup against the Michigan Wolverines as the Longhorns travel up to Ann Arbor in a big showdown on September 7th. The defense, we'll see if that rush defense remains as stout as it was, as Sweat and Miles Murphy both gone to the NFL. And in a unit that barely gave up 85 yards per game rushing last year, we'll see if Texas can fix their biggest bugaboo, and that is the pass defense. One of the worst in all of college football last year. Outside of the top 100, giving up 254 yards per game through the air. That's despite not having to commit a safety down in the box to help with the run game. So Texas has a lot of work to do as far as that secondary goes, but they have plenty of talent on that offensive side of the ball. Coming in at number 3 will be the Ohio State Buckeyes. In comes new offensive coordinator Chip Kelly, former UCLA head coach, decided to walk away from the head coaching job there in Westwood, joins his former protege, Ryan Day, on that staff at Ohio State. Folks, this offense is absolutely loaded at all the skill positions. One of the best wide receiving rooms in all of college football. We talked about the fantastic freshman in Jeremiah Smith. We're not asking him to be Marvin Harrison Jr. in his freshman year. So we're going to lean on Emeka Egbuka to stay healthy this year and produce the kind of numbers that we expect him to be able to produce if he's able to stay healthy. Emeka has all the talent in the world, and we just want to see him healthy for a full 12 games in the regular season and really just showcase his true abilities there at the wide receiver spot. Add in Carnell Tate, you're talking about a very talented trio there in Columbus. As far as the running back 1-2 combination of Quinshawn Junkins and Travion Henderson, if not the best, one of the best 1-2 combinations at the running back spot. The offensive line is anchored by left guard Donovan Jackson. Folks, this young man could find himself being drafted as early as the middle of as late as the middle of the second round. Depending on how this season goes, could sneak into the bottom of the first round. He's that good of an offensive guard. Still have some questions about the tackle spot. We'll see if Josh Simmons and Josh Fry can both at the left tackle and right tackle, respectively, have a really good year for the Buckeyes. Coming over from Alabama, Seth McLaughlin to man the center spot. The biggest question mark on this Ohio State team is the offensive quarterback spot. Will Howard was going to be beat out at the quarterback spot at Kansas State, comes over to Ohio State, has a lot of weapons to as I mentioned, but he's going to have to cut down on the turnovers, both the fumbles and the interceptions. If Buckeye fans were upset with Kyle McCord with the turnovers last year, Will Howard had more interceptions last year than Kyle McCord did. So something to keep in mind. Now, a lot of guys on this defense that had the opportunity to go to the NFL made a great decision to come back for the Buckeyes. JT Tulamolo and Jack Sawyer both need to have big-time productions if they have any desires to be first-round picks next year. Denzel Burke at the cornerback spot, absolutely fantastic corner. Want to see a little bit more consistency from him this year. And in from Alabama is Caleb Downs. The special teams could be a question mark for the Buckeyes this year, but they have a fantastic defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles. Expect this Buckeye defense to be really good once again in 2024. Coming in at the number 2 spot, new conference foe, the Oregon Ducks. Dan Lanning in his first couple of years has been absolutely spectacular, except in the games that matter. We talked about the knock as far as Ryan Day. Dan Lanning had 2 opportunities to beat Washington last year, couldn't get it done, but brings back a lot of weapons this year, both on the offense and defensive side of the ball. Offensive coordinator Willie Stein could be in line for a head coaching job if he's able to go back-to-back years with the production that we've seen out of his offense. He brings in the best quarterback this year in the Big Ten, and that's quarterback Dylan Gabriel. No question about it. We've seen what Dylan Gabriel could do there at Oklahoma, a familiar kind of scheme that he's going to be playing with there in Oregon, and he's got arguably the best wide receiving room in all of college football. Tez Johnson, Gary Bryant Jr., and Evan Stewart, as good of a trio as you'll find, and they're going to go neck and neck with Ohio State as far as who's the best in the Big Ten this year. Give a little bit of an edge because of the quarterback and the tight end spot for Oregon there. Terrence Ferguson is a fantastic weapon there for the Ducks. Running back Jordan James is an absolutely wrecking ball at the running back spot. Last year, over 700 yards, shared a lot of snaps there with Bucky Irvin, but now he's expected to be the number 1 guy. Big question mark for the Ducks is who will be RB2 for them this year. This defense is absolutely going to be punishing all year long. Jordan Birch, defensive end, could be one of the best in the country. At the linebacker spot, Jeffrey Beza, absolutely one of the best linebackers in college football. And secondary, folks, this could be the best secondary in all of college football. I know that that's saying a lot. That group there in Columbus is extremely talented, but they're starting 3 corners of Jabril Muhammad, Brandon Johnson, and Jarrell Florence, 3 of the best in college football. We'll see if the Ducks are able to take care of business in the non-conference before that big-time matchup on October 12th against the Buckeyes. And coming in at the number one spot in our preseason top 25 is the Georgia Bulldogs. Hunker down as we get ready to head to Athens. And once again, expect Kirby Smart to be right there in the national championship race. Already with 2 national championships under his belt in his first decade of being back at his alma mater. Offensive coordinator Mike Bobo, one of the best in the business, along with Glenn Schumann at the defensive coordinator spot, also one of the best. You're talking about Phil Parker at Iowa, Jim Knowles at Ohio State, and Glenn Schumann, arguably 3 of the best defensive coordinators in all of college football. They return quarterback Carson Beck, along with Florida transfer Trevor Etienne, younger brother of Travis coming out of Florida, makes the move up to Athens this year. A talented wide receiver core led by Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas, and Dylan Bell, along with Oscar Delp at the tight end spot. Folks, one of the best offensive line groups in all of college football, led by right guard Tate Rutledge and left tackle Ernest Green III. This unit is expected to be one of the best in college football. Will be in contention for that Joe Moore Award, along with fellow conference rivals Alabama, Texas, and LSU. The offensive line play in this conference is absolutely going to be spectacular. On the defensive side of the ball, Nazir Stackhouse will anchor that interior. Moving to the outside as a stand-up rusher in Mikael Williams. Folks, this young man could put up some very special numbers. Compares favorably from a metric standpoint to Travion Walker, went first overall in the NFL draft just a few years ago. Linebackers, absolutely spectacular in Chambers and Munden there for the Bulldogs. Secondary led by Malachi Starks, one of the best safeties in all of college football. They'll get tested out of the gate week 1 against the Clemson Tigers. Expect Georgia to be in the hunt all season long. Folks, as we round up this podcast here, want to say thank you for either listening to the pod live or catching us on our YouTube channel. It's going to be a tremendous 2024, and we're going to see a lot of movement all year long in our top 25 this year, because it will be fluid week in and week out based on your opponent and based on how you perform all season long. Once again, you can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP, and you can also catch the podcast, which we'll have in your feed each and every week on Google Play, Spotify, Anchor, and just anywhere you catch your podcast. Also, be sure to tune in to our YouTube channel, as we'll be doing more specials like this each and every week. On behalf of my team, Summer, Jessica, and our senior analyst, Billy, this is Kenneth signing off for the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. Have a great rest of your day, and can't wait till college football kicks off very soon. God bless everyone.